Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast about the world of PMing. My name is Austin, and I'm joined here with Amy Zhang, who's going to dive into her experiences at Procter & Gamble and her different roles where product management really helped her out. So why don't I pass it off to Amy to get started? Amy, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and why we should be so excited to speak with you?
Yeah, for sure. Hello, everyone. So my name is Amy. I'm currently in my fourth year at Ivy. What's interesting about me is I did my first 2 years in computer science, and I eventually decided not to pursue a dual degree. So I'm finishing off my university with a business degree, and I am currently on exchange in Hong Kong. I'm joining this across the seas with Austin. The background about me is I did have to take a year off in university where I was able to take a full long year internship at Procter & Gamble as a project manager, and did eventually decide to now do a role in brand management at the same company.
Yeah, for sure. But Amy, even in your time as a student, you've landed so many different roles, so many different internships, worked in so many different projects. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about your extracurriculars, the jobs that you worked at, and specifically dive in a little bit to your project management internship at P&G?
I think my number one priority in school has always been to develop new connections and gain new experiences through extracurriculars. So oftentimes I did prioritize extracurriculars, sometimes above my studies, but I've always been involved in school clubs, especially those related to business and computer science and engineering. So a combination of tech, entrepreneur, and business. I've worked part-time jobs as well, which is able to help me grow soft skills such as communications, professionalism, etc. And those jobs include working at retail, such as Sephora, Body Shop, places where also I'm able to kind of explore my other passions outside of school and the business tech world. Lastly, I've also been able to just explore the world of entrepreneurship through joining Illuminate. So I was able to help Illuminate plan some of their conferences in the earlier stages. And I'm currently back as general manager, helping manage some of the Illuminate Academy initiatives we have going on.
And it's really interesting because working on clubs in an entrepreneurial fashion while also doing customer service roles, dealing with stakeholders in retail, while also working with Illuminate to start new initiatives, plan projects from start to finish. You built so many different multifaceted skills. Now, I'm curious, how do those different skill sets help you in a product or project management role? Because often
Yeah.
people in these roles come from so many different backgrounds, and it's cool to see a lot of those different backgrounds reflected in you and your histories as well.
Yes, I love that you bring up the element of different backgrounds. So I think as a PM, the number one thing is you are bringing together people from different backgrounds together to bring together and bring about a successful project implementation. Through these various environments, I'm able to interact with all sorts of different type of people with their unique propositions and values, which then allowed me to make sure that I know how to effectively communicate with each and every one of them. Just being in different environments also allowed me to be really agile and adaptable to different environments. So when I'm working with different teams, they may have different needs or they might have different expectations on timing as well as how things are delivered. So I'm always able and ready for change. I think my various background has allowed me to really just jump into whatever new environment I'm in.
Yeah, 100%. And it must help you wear the different hats that you must wear at work at any given time, whether you're working with a stakeholder that's having a problem and you have to put on your customer service and conflict management hat, or whether you're pitching a new direction and you have to put on your sales and marketing hat and really convince everyone of your direction. There's so many different skills that are needed to really succeed as a PM. I'm curious, can you dive into a little bit about your role? Because I think we talked about PMing and project management at a high level, and I'm really curious about how this translates to you and your internship that you completed at P&G, because project management means something completely different at almost every single company. So let's dive in a little bit to what it means for you, and then we'll compare it to what it meant for me in my roles. I'm curious to see if there's a difference.
The difference between PMs, the project and product management, can be a blurry line. And I think what was interesting for me was that I was a technical PM, a technical project manager at a non-technical company. So a lot of things I did might be similar to what a product manager would do, but because I am in a company that's not launching a product to actual users, it's a bit different. So my role specifically was I was a project manager in financial planning services. So think of it as a fintech role where I was able able to help create internal developments for the payment systems that we have at P&G. So what's really interesting about P&G is that despite it being a generally known soap or toilet paper company, it actually has a really big IT presence with over 800 employees worldwide in IT and global business solutions. So I was part of the global business solutions team, and that just meant that we were kind of internal tech consultants that made improvements to make sure the business is conducted more efficiently with the use of technology. And then my role during the summer involved a lot of small projects where we are making improvements to the ultimate product, which in our case is, like I said, the payment system. And then we would identify the issues at hand, work with the various stakeholders, work with external developers as well as internal developers to bring about these changes, and also test and implement these changes.
Yeah, and that process you described is really similar to the design thinking process that we talk about a lot in the Illuminate product management course, as well as in a lot of different PM talks, where we start from this problem and we move to solution. And that's a really cool one, because that is a commonality with my role at Google, where I was working in product management, where really I was focused on that. I was focused on identifying problems, defining solutions, and then later would be tracking the project, making sure it's actually being executed, testing the results of products that we've launched, and then maintaining it moving forward with continual improvements, going back to that initial funnel. So it's interesting though, because my role title is product manager, your role is technical project manager. So it's cool that the actions are what's really important beyond just the name of the role. So I'm curious, let's dive just a little bit deeper. So let's talk about a typical day. It's a Wednesday, let's say. What does a typical day in the life of your role at P&G look like?
Yes, I think many of you can agree with this. And the first thing every time you go to work is check up on your emails, especially for a role like mine. It's very important. I need to see, if there are any updates, if there are any roadblocks to any of the projects I'm working on, and how I can be best assisting these individuals, whether that be to schedule a call or to push back some other deliverables in order to make time to have a roadblock resolved. After that, I would jump into my daily routine of various meetings across the board. So that's with different stakeholders. And it could be meetings with developers to make sure that they understand the task at hand. Could be meeting with the managers high up to convince them of certain resources we need to bring about a project. It could be working with the end users, or for example, people who are making these payments. So in P&G's case would be the buyers. What are their needs? Does our current solution solve it, etc.? And many times too, we'd have group-wide meetings with all of these stakeholders at the same time. Those would happen maybe once or twice a week, both to give everyone an update as well as to give everyone a time to kind of voice whether or not they had any concerns or opinions. Also, every day as a project manager, we held daily Scrum meetings. So Scrum meetings was a way for us to quickly go through all the tasks and then ensure that they are up to par to where we expect it to be based on the timelines existing. So a lot of meetings for sure. And when I'm not in meetings, you can definitely find me working on documents. So various documents to send to the various stakeholders to capture, the work we're doing. You can also probably find me testing or working at some of the projects myself. As someone with a little bit of technical background, I am able to help the developers when it comes to implementing and bring about some of the changes. So also something I would do. So a little bit of technical, mostly meeting and communication. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So you're meeting with all of these different stakeholders, and I'm sure that once you're there for a while, you start to figure out what your role as a product or project manager is with that particular stakeholder. I'm wondering, when you were meeting with all these different stakeholders, did you feel like you had different responsibilities to like different types of stakeholders? Did you always feel like you had some kind of unified purpose as a product manager? Curious how that worked for you with all these different meetings.
Yeah, so different stakeholders will have their most important question. So for the higher ups, a lot of time, their most important thing is why are we doing this and how will we do it? So for them, it's a lot of convincing, a lot of signifying, proving them that there is a proof of concept out there, and that, here's the expected results and why these expected results matter. For the developers, they care about really the what are we doing? So, what exactly do you want from me? How could I code this for you? What is the priorities when it comes to these changes? Because a lot of times too, that with the limited time that they have, they do want to make sure that they tackle the most important steps first. And obviously they won't know that without the help of myself and the interviews I do with the end users. And then for the end users, it's really a matter, again, how. So how would this change my life and how would this make my job easier? If they don't see a vision for it, really that goes up all the way to the top, and no one really has faith or a need or desire to make this project happen. So yeah, different stakeholders would ask their own questions. And again, I would provide different documents or conduct different meetings to answer those specific questions.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the other piece of managing a whole bunch of stakeholders, I'm sure, especially within the first 2 to 3 weeks of your job, is that initial, oh my gosh, I have so many people that I need to answer to, coordinate with. I'm curious, can you walk me through your onboarding? Walk me through the first 2 to 3 weeks of getting used to dealing with all of these different people. How did you build that empathy? How did you build that mindset of, I need to work the best way with this person? And how'd you figure out the best way to do that?
For sure. It's really interesting that you brought this up. So this is exactly one of the reasons why, for example, my role at P&G lasted a year. So they really want to make sure that you have all the time you need to both get familiarized with the stakeholders and know how to work with them and actually bring about these projects. So I would always encourage anyone, if they have an opportunity, to do a longer internship in a PM or a technical role. For me in particular, I think I'm really grateful to have a manager that knows the importance of being familiarized with the environment. So I would say the first 1 or 2 weeks, it was just a lot of meetings to get to know one another, where we didn't talk about the projects, but we just talked about what exactly you do and what do you foresee a potential partnership between us would look like. So also understanding, are they someone that's really busy and doesn't have a lot of time for meetings, or are they someone that prefer to not have meetings and would prefer to have written out emails instead? So just getting to know them on a personal, professional level before diving into the projects. And I think something else that's really important is knowing your resources. So of course, your manager is someone you can go to, but also, is there a separate group within the company that answers specific questions? Do we have an Azure team that can help with the DevOps or the Scrum side of things? And do we have, for developers, is there someone that I can reach out to that has all the answers beyond just the people that I'm going to be working with in the project? So knowing the stakeholders and knowing your resources will be the two most important elements.
Yeah, 100%. And I remember when I was starting my role, I literally had a drawn map of how this organization works and all different departments that I need to coordinate with, because it can be a lot. It can be surprising to newcomers how many different departments and pieces to the puzzle there are, especially in these large organizations. So speaking of large organizations, there's often a pretty complex process to land a role in one of these types of companies. And I'm sure the students that are watching who are trying to break into PM, interested in PM, really want to know, how did you get to where you were? How did you get that role at P&G in PM from the get-go?
Yeah, firstly, I would encourage everyone to broaden their scope beyond tech companies. So I, for one, did my technical role in a non-tech company, and I feel like I was able to gain so much out of it regardless. If anything, because I'm in the environment of different people, so both business and technical people, I was able to learn a lot more of soft skills as well when it comes to communications with different parties. So P&G, I really, quite frankly, just stumbled across the opportunity, I believe, on a job site and just applied. What's great about P&G is that they have a very standardized process that they use internationally. So not just for Canada, but it's the same process they use, in Asia, in Europe, etc. So there's a lot of resources online to prepare you for the interviews as well as their online assessment. Another really interesting about P&G is they didn't really prioritize resumes. It was more about the interviews and whether or not you are a fit for a company. And you being a fit for a company doesn't mean that you're the best candidate, but you're most similar to their existing employees and that they believe you'll fit well with the existing culture, which, made the interview process really easy. Because for me, I was just really having a conversation with like-minded people. A lot of times I would say that if you didn't enjoy the interview process, most likely you wouldn't have enjoyed the company anyways. So it's always a screening for both. And number one thing is making sure that you are exemplifying how you are able to work in different environments. You're exemplifying how you have different traits that they could see a potential for you using the role at the company you want to get into. And also just being very open, very friendly, bubbly, a lot of times too, because they're interview driven selection process. Whether or not you're approachable definitely is on the criteria list. Mm-hmm.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's really important to be approachable and communicative and demonstrate your best self, right? And that's how you can land these incredible opportunities. So you mentioned in your interview that it wasn't really about your resume. It was about your fit. It was about the conversations that you had with the people at P&G. I'm curious, how does your university education play into this? Do you feel that your university background in business and computer science was sufficient in preparing you for the role?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, ultimately, they still want to make sure that I was someone with technical capabilities. My 2 years in computer science did just that. When it comes to my degree in business, honestly, a lot of the business courses, I'm sure Austin attests to this, is learning about the soft skills, how to participate, how to creatively solve a problem, how to identify issues. So a lot of those things are something I can carry forward into my work. Most importantly, I think all the extracurriculars that I did allowed me to be very open-minded and allowed me to be very excited about new opportunities. And they can see that during my interview, I was someone who's very eager to learn, someone who's very open to learn. And I think that definitely added points in my favor. Additionally, I think school is such an important element of letting us know how to time manage, especially as a project manager. A lot of times we are working with very tight deadlines and we're working with various different parties like we would in a group project. So school gave us the experience to know how to prioritize things and how to put aside time still for yourself so you're able to not burn out while getting the process successfully delivered. Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm also curious if you did things outside of class in particular that you really thought were helpful in getting the new job. I know we talked about at the start a bunch of different things that you did, but if you just had to pick one or two, what do you think would really be the experiences that helped you be the best PM ever?
Yeah, I mean, surprising will be actually my retail experience. So again, because I'm working with all those different stakeholders, it's very important to get them energized and excited about the project we're working on. And in retail, we learn how to communicate like that, right? How to sell an idea. So in reality, I'm kind of bring those selling skills into my workplace by selling the project and selling the vision at hand to everyone on the team. Another thing I think is very important is knowing just how to set time for yourself. So because I was able to do all those things, I was always very aware and cognizant of whether or not I'm allowing myself to take time to relax and to have breaks. And I think that allowed me to carry forward the entire year of internship without feeling tired and always excited to work the next day, and knowing that I was able to give myself enough rest and enough time to be happy outside of work. Mm-hmm.
100%. And I'm curious, during those really busy times, during peak busy season, projects about to launch, deadlines coming up, how do you maintain your work-life balance? How do you avoid burnout? What are some of your strategies to handle these difficult situations, like you said?
This is an advice that is probably going to be very different than other people's advice. And for me, it was actually having work on my phone. I know a lot of times people say that's a way where you can never turn off your work, but it was a way for me to live without worrying about work. So I could go outside and take a walk, go for a run, go shopping, and still make sure that I don't need to worry about work, because if something is urgent, I could just answer it on my phone. So I never had to really sit at my desk all day for 8 hours a day. I could be doing exercises or just relaxing while the work is still in essence continuing on. So again, I think that's definitely depends on what company you're in and depends on whether or not you're someone who's able to not get distracted with having work on your phone. But for me, that worked out really well. Another thing was set blocks for yourself. So I purposely made sure that, like, you know what, today I'm gonna do 5 hour block of this. And after the 5 hours is not done, I told myself, you know what, it's a tomorrow thing. So giving yourself strict deadlines on how much you want to work on things is very important, because a lot of times too, when we feel like we're on a grind, we just keep working until the project's finished, when in reality it's not that much of a rush anyways. And after that 8-10 hour grind, you end up feeling so exhausted and tired that you can't even work the next day, right? So really stick to your hours and set boundaries for yourself.
100%. I feel like, especially in project management, where you're dealing with all these different stakeholders, your work can be so clumpy, for a lack of better words, where you might have some lulls and then 50 emails at once. And then being able to take advantage of those lulls is so important because it energizes you for those bursts. So very good advice. Very cool that that's similar across different industries. I'm also curious, what is one skill aside from energy management, stakeholder management, that you couldn't live without as a PM? Or maybe it's one we've already talked about.
I think written communications. So I think we often undervalue how important it is to write an effective, efficient email. So especially when you're talking with all these stakeholders and maybe you're sending multiple emails a day to them on different topics, you need to make sure that the email is concise, straight to point, and that it's professional worded, that they also feel like you're valuing their time. So written communication is something that I feel like I was really able to develop by receiving emails as well as sending them. So when I receive emails, I will also take note, what did they do well with this specific email? Is it maybe adding a header that grabbed my attention? Is it maybe breaking it down into different topics within the email? Is it making a list? Is it creating a table instead of just long paragraphs? So all of these things and different methods of communicating various topics allow me to kind of different topics with an idea of how I want to communicate it. Emails is very important. And I know what I definitely think something we'll learn most in the workplace. But once we get the hang of it, it becomes useful in almost everyday scenario as well. If you're writing a complaint email to a company for something, you make sure you grab their attention, you make sure you let them know exactly what you want, exactly what they're doing wrong. So very good skill that will come with time.
100%. And it's really interesting because we talked about so many different skills, so many different backgrounds, how they all play into PM. I'm curious, is this how you saw PM when you first applied to the role? What drew you to the role to begin with?
So what's interesting about P&G is that when you apply for a role, you really apply for a organization. So in my case, I applied for the IT organization. So they kind of assign a role to you based on your background and your passions. So for me, I did say that I'm really passionate about communication, really passionate about combining business and tech. So a PM for them was a perfect role for me. And quite frankly, because I knew that they picked this role for me, I did expect it to be more like this. I expected to leverage my communication, my time management, my resources planning abilities. That being said, something I wasn't expecting is also how technical it could get. So again, when there are things, especially as P&G, where we don't have a lot of internal developers, a lot of times if we want something small done, we might just have to do it ourselves. And that maybe includes getting a certificate from Microsoft here and there, from Google here and there. They do take time, but once you get it, it's skills that you can leverage and use in other projects as well, and you become more valuable to the company. So they're always willing and happy to invest in your abilities. So I think most importantly, just learn and keep learning.
I think that's a great takeaway. And speaking of learning and keep learning, when you finished your internship in the IT department in project management, you learned something new again and decided to move to brand management, which is pretty safely outside of the technical sphere, I would say. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about that transition? Why did you decide to leave the PM path?
Yeah, for sure. So I would definitely say that I decided to try PM because it just made sense, both in terms of my background and in terms of my desire to give tech a try. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when I think back on what my passion is, it's always been marketing. Even my first internship was at a digital marketing company. So I knew that I had a desire to be creative and I had a desire to work with consumers. There's a lot of psychology behind marketing that I love to explore as well. So I ultimately gave myself the slack and said that even though you may be studying computer science, follow your passion, go into marketing. Also, I think it's very important to know that different companies are known for different roles, right? So for P&G, they are more known for their brand management or for their marketing roles as opposed to technical roles. So it makes sense that while within this company, why not try to get the best role that this company is known for? Another important element to why I made the decision was also the people I was working with. So while I'm working with all these different people, I'm not working with as many business personnel who have a lot more energy or who are more into thinking bold, thinking creative. Typically, the IT folks are more getting things done kind of people, which I tend to identify less with. Even when I was in IT, everyone could tell that I was a business person right away. So it was no surprise to them when I told them I decided to move into marketing. Another thing was at P&G, they didn't have as much opportunities in IT in Canada. A lot of their IT roles were overseas in Asia and Europe. So it just made sense that for developmental purposes, if I want a long-term role that had more space for growth, then the business sector would make more sense.
That makes a ton of sense. So I'm curious though, after you've made this transition, do you still think your time in PM was worth it? Do you still think you took things away that helped you in this brand role?
100%. I think there's three elements to it. First and foremost is I understood what the company is like. I know how it functions. I know what the hierarchy is. I've spent a year here. I know how to work in this company. So that's number one. When I went back to brand management role, I could tell how working there a year made me able to jump into projects that much faster while everyone's still getting on board. Week 3, I've already submitted 2 deliverables. So it made me work very efficiently, and which spoke highly of my ability to excel in whichever role in the company. Secondly, it was knowing technical data side to the information I was receiving and working with. So as a brand manager, a lot of times you are working with big data and you're trying to extrapolate findings from it so that you can make changes to brand when it comes to marketing or different sales initiatives. But for me, because I've had that technical experience of getting that data, I know maybe some caveats to these data, what might be some underlying reasons behind it that you wouldn't see just on a surface level. And then if I, for example, need to make changes to the data to manipulate in a certain way, I would know how using the various data processing systems we used. And lastly, is just I was able to connect with more people in the company. So because I had a year in tech, now I'm in brand management, I feel like I know almost everyone there, which is a great feeling to have too, being able to be comfortable with your coworkers, no matter whether or not you've worked directly with them before. And again, I feel like I have a big family and big presence within the company already.
100%. And I think your story exemplifies the fact that there's never a mistake in your journey, whether you decide to go into PM or not go into PM or try something different and then pivot back to PM later or not do PM at all. Your path is what you make it, and you learn so much no matter what way you go. So as long as you're always learning, there's so much to take away.
Exactly. I feel like that's what internships are for. It's for you to discover. So never feel like your internship should be preparing you for your full time. It should be a way for you to explore where your full time is. So I'm really grateful that I took the year off to do so.
100%. So I'm also curious to get your take because you've been on so many different sides of the equation when it comes to PM. PM is such a hot role right now. It's talked about among lots of tech professionals. Engineers seem to want to switch into it. Marketing folks want to switch into it. People are trying to move into this function. But I'm curious, can you help our listeners cut through the hype, cut through this fanfare around the role? What do you think would make a successful PM? And more importantly, what kind of person do you think would be happy in a PM role?
One thing that's very important with PMs is that at the end of the day, you are seeking the execution of something that you may not necessarily care that much about. I think that's something that I would say cut down the hype a little bit, especially if you're working in a product that you are not that familiar with or something that doesn't touch your everyday life. It's really hard for you to care that much about whether or not the outcome is going to be as great as you're making it out to be. For example, I was helping improve a payment process, right? Am I ever going to use the payment process? No. Do I really deeply down care about the payment process? No. But I still have to make sure that it gets executed. And again, I mentioned it before, but a big part of PM is selling it, right? So if you're not that passionate about what you sell, it definitely makes it difficult. And again, the reason why I'm perhaps switching to marketing is because I was someone really passionate about certain things and I have these big ideas I want to bring to life. And PM is not necessarily for you to do that. You need to be very feasible when it comes to planning to make sure that it's something that can be done within a certain amount of time. You can get approval, you need to get funding, resources, etc. So the ideas that you do bring to life are very much grounded and can be tedious small tasks, but it can also be big ones as well, just depending on which company and the scope of your role.
Makes sense. All right. So I think we got time for one more question. And this one's going to be a little bit of a big one, but an important one. I'm curious, what advice do you have for students that are interested in exploring the PM world?
Yeah, maybe I can summarize a few things I brought up. One being that don't just set your scope to the tech industry. So look outside for PM roles within non-technical companies as well. A lot of times those companies allow you to really develop yourself and allow you to be with people who are also learning alongside you. So you're able to get that community as you venture into the world of PM. Secondly, is just understanding that having a very diverse background, even if it's something completely unrelated, like retail, may actually help you out when it comes to succeeding in your role. Thirdly, it's just being very open-minded, knowing that there are limitations within your role, but at the same time, it's every role is what you make out of it. So take the time to get to know the people around you, learn what your resources are so that you can maximize your time in your internship and eventually lead those opportunities into a full-time. And last but not least is just have passion for it. So be excited about bringing something to life, be excited about working with different people, because that excitement does carry through in your interviews as well, which makes you a more desirable candidate for any company to look into.
100%. Well, those are some very wise words. And thank you very much for a fantastic podcast. It's been an incredible talking with you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Austin. Thank you, everyone.
No
Bye.
problem. Bye. See you in the next one.